Good morning, noon, evening or night, depending when you're watching this video. My name is Alegende and welcome back to World of Tanks and the greatest of games, where I show you several interesting moments in several games. Starting off with me playing in my ELC Evo 90, one of the stealthiest light tanks in the game. And of course, as a light tank on cliff, most of the time you want to claim that hill. However, when I make my approach wanting to go further up the hill, I actually stop and instead, after seeing the T-44, fire some shots into that tank. And maybe for the best, because most of the time a lot of pre-aiming enemies are holding their fire, pre-aiming at this section of the hill. If I want to go up, like the enemy ELC did, I will take at least one shot. And after a minute of contemplating, I'm still not going upwards, because going upwards might, well, get me some more spots, know where more enemy tanks are, but no assist fire, because in order to do that, I have to overexpose myself and have a duel against the enemy ELC at the same time. Down here, I got enough cover to pick off the enemies on site one by one, being more available and also being in a more safer location, and that way I can deal damage both to the object 7032 and the Renegade. And as time progresses, I'm feeling more and more comfortable to peek as more enemies are appearing at the 8 line at our side of the map. But that is the downside, that the enemies now have easily flanked around and now putting pressure on the middle. But I know that now it is the most important time to go up to the mountain to get a good view if the enemies want to make further pushes, which they do. And now I am not overexposed to that many enemies than if I would have stayed down in my previous position. So it's all about knowing when your position is, well, at the highest risk. It does have a downside, of course, not going upwards to the hill immediately, but this way I still got a relative good amount of hit points. I can peek more, get more vision now, and my team still got a very good defensive line at the back with all those tank destroyers. And of course, from the hill I still have some more flanking shots, with the enemies having more trouble to elevate their guns towards my position. So this back and forth engagement is continuing for a while. Eventually the enemies are able to get some shots into my tank, but I still am managing to survive and dishing out more and more damage. Now, as the battle is ending, I am trying to make my way down the hill in order to get some final shots off. And I see a lot of people that have trouble traversing downhill without getting themselves destroyed. And like, it is being very conscious which route you take down the hill, which route is the safest to traverse. Maybe you do need to have some skiing or snowboarding expertise in order to know, okay, this part of the rock formation of this part of the hill is very steep, so most likely I will die here. But if I go slightly more horizontal and go downwards a slope a little bit more to the right or to the left, then it is a far better chance that I survive. And that way I see a particular route and am able to make my way down the hill. And finally, when I'm now still having some hit points and there's only one enemy tank left at the very cliffside, I of course want to make this as spectacular as possible. Unfortunately, not killing the Astromlax, but to get a absolutely amazing final shot into the tank, and shortly after he gets destroyed. So moving on towards the next replay, and it is iTzGodlyz in his Lansen C. Going to deal, well, an extraordinary amount of damage for a tier 8 medium. So how will he do this? Well, first things first, he is not going the conventional medium direction by going towards the north. No, instead he goes towards the heavy tank side and immediately encounters the ELC, quickly switching towards a HE shell just in case. That shows you that he's very conscious about which shell type he needs to use. However, in the beginning, his effectiveness isn't really that noticeable. He gets a few shots off, sure, but it's still the heavy tank side and as medium, especially in a low armored medium like the Lance and C. It's quite difficult to peek, take a shot and without getting fired back. Luckily for itzGodlyz, the enemies aren't really that aggressive on this side, allowing him to move up pretty far towards this, well, choke point pretty much, because from this point it is very hard to push further because there are multiple enemies waiting in the back line, and in this far too open field he will be a way too easy target to be destroyed. That would be the case if you don't know how to traverse this side near the water, which is a side that is very popular with the more skilled players, and itzGodlyz of course is a very skilled player and is able to traverse this side. So how does he exactly do it? How do you traverse this side? Well, actually you want to have as high of elevation as possible. Look at the ground. You see several patches of pure white snow. These patches most of the time are the more flatter parts of the side, which it's far unlikely to slide off. Eventually you will slide off into the water, but you want to do this as late as possible in order to get out of the water before the 10 seconds before you drown. And from this position all the way in the corner, it is suddenly a lot easier to counter the several enemy tanks that are occupying the more defensive locations. And when one particular part of these defensive locations is dealt with, he can move up further, and at one point he recognizes not when the AMBT is dead, but he knows that he's getting swarmed by his team, that he is already moving forwards, allowing him to get most damage before his team arrives. So right now he goes in, focus the Scorpion down with HE again, right ammo choice, then one shot in the T28, but then focuses back to the front and let his teammates deal with the now one-shot T28, so he can continue towards the next enemy further up front. After dealing with the Pantera, he is in the most forward position in order to catch the final tank, the Judas, out and get most of the damage for himself. So quick overview once again, going towards the more unconventional side can work sometimes. You can have retreated quickly enough, but getting towards that location all the way in the corner and also going as far forward as possible allows him to get towards the final few enemy tanks, as the first allow him to claim most of the damage. Moving on towards the next replay, and this time it is me again, now playing in my Centurion 5-1. A very interesting tank which isn't really that remarkable, but I like the playstyle for it, and it is one of the last premium tanks that I actually bought, which I really want to buy for some reason. This of all tanks. But in this game I'm gonna show you why this tank is still quite capable in the right hands and in the right circumstances. So after the standard location, quite a bit in the middle, getting a bit of overview in a few shots in, I recognize at some point that most of the enemies aren't really in this flank anymore, and I am taking a forward position because I know that I have backup if I'm getting rushed by, well, everything that is standing across me across this little hill, which turned out to be not really that many tanks anymore. So from that location I'm able to get more shots in several enemy tanks that are still trying to push a bit forward, Getting in a hold down position more shots off allows me to accumulate more damage without getting damaged myself. And looking closely when I'm not getting outflanked from the side. Now moving further up towards the middle location when I recognize that the enemies is winning that particular part and trying to hold their progression, and also allowing a general overview for assistance, but always moving towards the more optimal spots for damage. And by doing that I'm catching out several enemy tanks, killing off the Object 430, the Progetto, catching out the Sandlag and the other Progetto, if he would have retreated further back. But after dealing with that flank, I'm actually going back towards the middle in order to regain vision on the beach gang, or the tanks that are coming from the beach, and just in time, as one particular tank is already making his way up the slope. But after a small minute, several enemy tanks are making their way closer to my position, and since most of my support is now far away, I actually retreat back to my initial spot with bushes when these flanking attempts were occurring, with camouflage and better overview for ambush shots. And by doing that, I'm getting several more shots off in the Emil tool and finally in the CC, and that way this is a victory. And finally we are watching once again iTzGodlyz, this time in his DVP VTU, showing the absolute best strength of a medium tank, which is dealing damage and repositioning. So the battle starts off, well, very typically. He chooses one flank to pursue, sees that there are not many enemies on that flank, and goes further up towards the backside of the enemy team and racks up already a decent amount of damage, being in this autoloader tank, dishing out 1280 burst damage with a relative short reload, and you are able to do that in this tank. However, at some point he actually repositions all the way back after realizing that the team has lost over 3/4 of the map. So he actually goes all the way back into the lower right corner of the map and awaits the advance of the enemy, as it turns out to be this battle is turning into a 4 against 9 situation, outnumbering iTzGodlyz team. So from this position iTzGodlyz is able to ambush several enemy tanks coming from a alternative flank when the enemies are too occupied with his other teammates, and also keeping an eye out on the initial flank he pursued, the 8 line. However, it is also at this point that he repositions again, actually sacrifices some of his HP eventually, although if he wasn't tracked he wouldn't lost that far, but he was willing to sacrifice HP in order to get out of the corner when he sees that he can reclaim this flank after he has dealt with the Force B. Now, with this flank cleared, he is able to get an alternative position in order to fire at the other few tanks that are still at iTzGodlyz base. That way he is able to catch out that pesky Progetto, which he received damage from when repositioning. And after that he repositions once again, this time drives around the entire map in order to catch the artillery and eventually get behind the oppressing STRV, being able to fully destroy him and also fully deal with the batchet artillery, which eventually gets spotted. So now with one enemy tank left, iTzGodlyz moves up towards the last known position of the Grill 15. However, he's actually spotted all the way back in the corner right there. iTzGodlyz is able to hit 3 out of the 4 shell, but it's just not enough. He leaves the Grill 15 at 1 hit point. But this time, iTzGodlyz does something that I don't think a lot of people would do. I think most of us, me included, would just go for it, especially with the time pressure right now. It's still 3 minutes, but it's relatively short. Just go for the grill 15, drive towards him, and try to get the first shot off. But that is actually not the most safest way to do it. Now, iTzGodlyz is actually repositioned for the 4th and final time after leaving the grill on 1 HP, and he moves himself to a far more safer position in a location where the grill 15 would not 1, 2, 3 expect iTzGodlyz. Because what the griller 15 could be thinking after a while during the repositioning of iTzGodlyz, he must think that he is just waiting there for him, so the grill 15, which might also be quite a skilled player, repositions himself going up towards the 8th flank, but iTzGodlyz perfectly anticipates it by staying in that particular location, catching out the grill 15 and making this a certain victory. So in this battle, due to several repositioning, catching the enemies out by being at unexpected angles, is able to do 7,500 damage this game. So that is all the interesting moments I want to share with you for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more of this content, do consider a donation through Streamlabs or through Patreon in order for me to keep continuing this content for sure in the future. And as always, I will see you in the next video. For now, later!